They pointed at his shoulder first. 3 men in uniform, crisp and newly pressed, their insignias polished to a bright and almost boastful gleam, stepped into his path with all the authority of youth untested. Their eyes narrowed. "You can't stand here." One of them spat, though his voice carried not command but insecurity. "This is reserved." The man they confronted did not move. He was tall, though slightly stooped, his frame carved by years of bearing both weapon and grief. His jacket, though faded, bore decorations that were not purchased in shops or issued lightly in ceremony. They were earned in heat, in hunger, in the silence between. Strangers paused mid-step, their eyes flicking between the young officers and the solitary figure who stood with quiet defiance. He had not spoken a word. He had not raised his hands. He had simply stood, his stillness, a weapon sharper than anything they carried. It was then that one of the men jabbed again, louder this time, his finger pressed against the old cloth, as though trying to tear it free. "This is out of order. You're out of order." But the man with the frayed jacket did not flinch. His silence unsettled them, for silence was harder to fight than anger. Silence held weight, silence bore witness. And then, from just behind the line of self-assured youth, came a voice that cut through the air like a blade, low and commanding, echoing with something older, heavier, irrevocable. "This outranks yours." Every head turned. A colonel, chest broad, eyes carved from battle seen and survived, had stepped forward. His hand hovered not near his weapon, not near his side, but lifted in a slow, deliberate gesture, pointing not to his own insignia but to the shoulder they had mocked, the frayed patch that seemed unworthy in their eyes. The colonel's voice did not rise. It did not need to. Authority dripped from every syllable, carrying the weight of funerals attended, of folded flags delivered to trembling hands, of nights where silence had been broken only by whispered prayers. And with those words the crowd inhaled as one, silence blanketing the plaza. The 3 young men stiffened, but their bravado shrank, for the truth had been spoken, and it was unshakable. The man in the worn jacket was named Daniel Hayes. He was not a man of many words, nor had he ever sought the spotlight. His hands, scarred and stiff, carried memories etched into skin, each line a record of survival. His gait carried a limp, subtle but permanent, earned in terrain where footsteps could mean life or death. His eyes, though softened with age, held a depth of storms weathered, of brothers lost, of promises made and kept in mud and blood. Years ago, Daniel had been a soldier of the infantry, the kind who carried more weight than rations should allow, the kind who slept in mud so thick it swallowed boots whole, the kind who never asked what the mission meant but knew who it was meant to protect. He had seen jungles that hummed with unseen predators, deserts that baked men until their skin cracked like dry earth, and cities whose streets whispered only of grief. He had carried comrades across fields where the air itself seemed to burn, had felt blood hot against his palms, had whispered 1,000 times to the fallen, "You are not alone." There had been one moment, one that haunted him above all, that no medal could redeem. A convoy had gone silent under fire, radios crackling into void. Daniel had been one of the few left breathing in the aftermath. He had crawled back, dragging a friend whose last breath clung to the air between them. He had whispered his name until silence swallowed it. And though command had pinned medals to his chest in ceremonies later, none of them mattered. What mattered was that his friend never walked home. The weight of that memory lived in Daniel's silence. It shaped the way he stood, the way he carried himself, the way he never seemed to demand a place, yet always belonged wherever he stood. And so, when the young officers mocked his shoulder, they mocked not cloth but sacrifice. They mocked not age but the graves of men who would never know it. The colonel who had stepped forward knew this. He had seen Daniel once before, years back, in a dusty outpost where water was scarce and hope scarcer. He remembered the man who carried not only his own pack, but the gear of 2 men too weak to march further. He remembered the quiet nods exchanged across firelight, the kind of communication forged between men who knew tomorrow was not promised. And he remembered one thing most of all. Daniel Hayes had never once asked for recognition. The crowd waited, breath caught between outrage and reverence. The three men who had pointed, their chests puffed with false rank, stood paralyzed, caught in the heavy gaze of the colonel. It was not anger in that gaze. It was disappointment. Disappointment deeper than reprimand. Disappointment that reached into the marrow of their youth and reminded them that their uniforms had been pressed in peace, while his had been tattered in war. Daniel did not speak. He did not need to. His silence was the echo of the colonel's words, his stillness the hammer that drove truth into the stone of that moment. Time slowed. People in the plaza began to realize who he was, or at least what he represented. A woman with a child clasped her son's hand tighter, her eyes softening as she recognized the weight of his jacket. A man carrying a briefcase removed his hat, holding it against his chest without knowing why. Respect was contagious, and it spread like fire through the gathered strangers. One of the young officers stammered, his lips forming words that faltered before air gave them life. Another looked down, shame burning his cheeks. The third, defiant still, clenched his jaw, but even he could not withstand the silence that pressed upon him, heavy and righteous. The colonel's voice returned, softer this time, but sharper for it. What he wears is not fabric. It is history. It is sacrifice. And if you cannot see that, then you are not fit to wear what you do. The words struck like a verdict. No rebuttal could rise against them. No regulation, no manual, no excuse. Daniel's eyes shifted once, meeting the colonel's. No smile, no nod, only the briefest recognition of shared memory of battles endured. That was enough. And then, almost as though choreographed by some invisible hand, the crowd began to straighten. A man in the back removed his cap. A teenager placed his hand over his heart. A group of strangers who had only moments ago been passers-by now stood aligned, silent in respect. The young officers stepped back, their bravado broken, their shoulders no longer squared but slumped beneath the weight of their own arrogance. They disappeared into the crowd, swallowed by the silence they had once tried to command. Daniel Hayes remained still. He had not spoken a single word. Yet his silence had commanded more than their shouting ever could. The colonel turned, his gaze sweeping the gathered crowd, and then back again to Daniel. His words, spoken for all, settled into the air like stone into still water. Some ranks are stitched on, others are carved into the soul. Remember the difference. The crowd did not cheer. They did not need to. Their silence was the salute, their stillness the anthem. Respect did not always need noise. It needed only truth. Daniel finally shifted his weight, his limp carrying him forward. Each step was steady, deliberate, unshaken. The crowd parted, a path opening not out of command but out of reverence. Strangers bowed their heads. Mothers pulled children close. Young men lowered their eyes. He passed through them all without a word. His presence a reminder that some victories are not won with weapons but with endurance. Behind him, the colonel watched, knowing he had witnessed something rare. Not a confrontation, but a lesson. Not anger, but dignity. He knew that years from now, those who stood in that plaza would remember not the officers who pointed, but the man who did not move. And as Daniel disappeared into the streets, his shoulders bowed beneath the jacket of memory. The plaza returned to life, but it was changed. Conversations hushed into reverence, footsteps softened, and hearts carried a weight they had not known before. The story spread. As stories do, it traveled on voices, through whispers across tables at dinner, in classrooms, in barracks, in homes where flags hung folded in corners. People repeated the line, the one that had stopped arrogance cold and lifted silence into glory. This outranks yours. It became a reminder, not just of Daniel Hayes, but of every man and woman whose sacrifice lived unseen in quiet corners of the world. And though Daniel never sought to teach, never wished to be known, he had given something to all who witnessed it. The truth that respect is not given by authority but earned by sacrifice. That day, a plaza became a classroom. The lesson, honor is not worn, honor is lived. And as you hear this story, wherever you are, whether at home, at work, or walking in your own busy streets, remember Daniel Hayes, the silent man who carried a nation's weight on his shoulder without demanding recognition. Take a moment, reflect, share where you are listening from. Share what this story stirs within you, because stories like this do not belong to the past. They belong to us all, in every step we take, in every act of quiet respect we give to those who have carried burdens we may never see. Some battles are fought with weapons. Some battles are fought with silence, and sometimes the silence wins.